evening, folks, and welcome to the Square D, the Jack the Ripper of GAA Analytics. My name is Connor Galvin, and I'm joined, as ever, by the irrepressible professor himself. Top Gear have the Stig, the GAA have Stephen O'Mara. Stephen, good evening. Happy Monday. How's the form with you?
Not so bad. You never fail to build me up, Connor. I'll give you that. A bit of technical issues over the weekend. Laptop screen broken, so I'm looking at the monitor and a laptop. So if it looks like I'm trying to avoid eye contact, I absolutely am. And if you're wondering why I have a musician and general arty stuff behind me, it's because I'm in an artist's shed.
The fellow with the banjo now will come in handy for the intro, all right. And believe you me when I say I only build you up to knock you back down. So our focus this evening is going to be on an epic encounter yesterday. Monaghan and Tyrone. In what, on the face of it, was like the gunfight at the OK Corral. There was bullets flying all directions. Ulster football is not renowned exactly for its high-scoring matches. In actual fact, in 135 years of Ulster Championship finals, only once have both teams ever scored over 20 points in the game. So this type of shootout is certainly quite an outlier in recent times. I think the odds on an Ulster Championship match exceeding that, you're dealing with some fairly precocious odds down the bookies. Stephen, give us an overview of what happened yesterday. The public rhetoric, right, or the post-match rhetoric across all sorts of GA analysis was this was two teams simply having a go, end-to-end stuff, off the cuff. Is that actually what happened?
No, to be honest, look, you've got the rhetoric from the weekend that, especially the second half, they just went for it. I'm going to let you in on a secret now that anybody in inter-county setups and even serious senior setups knows teams don't just abandon a season of plans and preparation and say, we're just going to go for it. Doesn't happen unless you're nearly dead and buried with 10 minutes left. And all the rhetoric that I heard yesterday is completely flawed in the nuts and bolts of what actually happened. And what we're going to see is, far from teams abandoning sweepers and deciding we'll have a go man on man, it was a structural element, a structural change by Monaghan in the second half, where in summary, we'll go through it in detail. In summary, Monaghan tried to kick the ball through the field in the first half quite frequently, and it didn't end well. In the second half, they constantly carried the ball through the hands, and it exposed defensive issues. Tyrone had, as we're going to see, the worst defensive record per 10 phases in the National League. And when Monaghan did A, which ultimately was carry the ball, as opposed to B, which was trying to kick the ball through the middle third, which they did lots of in the first half, ultimately Tyrone's defence wasn't up to it. And their sweeper was forced out to deal with begging, as we look at forensically. But the notion that the teams just threw caution to the wind, absolutely not what I'm seeing based on the in-depth analysis.
Okay, well, listen, you mentioned one of the chief protagonists there, Mr. Rory Beggan. And obviously his opposite number there was Niall Morgan, two of the most enigmatic figures in the game. Got me with the days when the old goalies would put the big heavy O'Neill's ball down and hoof it as far as they could possibly get it out the field. And then they retreated back in their goal from the days of John O'Leary with the ankle boots. Things have changed quite substantially. Let's look at the kickouts first, because this was a deciding factor in the game.
Yeah, well, I suppose the key, I think, firstly, you're dealing with two of the top handful of keepers in the country, you know. I think with, Stephen Clux's retirement, you're looking at maybe the top two, quite possibly. I would certainly, as I think, probably is a top two. There was a huge amount made of the long kick out. And again, this is one of the beauties of the analysis. And we'll see here, that's Monaghan's, if I'm not mistaken, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Is that Monaghan's first half kickouts? I think I put the first. Yeah. Regardless, we'll see. That's the kick. That's Monaghan's kick-out map, and we'll see. The big talk is the big long one over the top, and Began has a monster kick, and Morgan, even though he's not the same size of a man, has a monster kick as well. Probably only Sean Patton and Conor Gleeson maybe can compare to it of the top tier keepers. And there's this sense, because you get these very memorable scores when they go long over the top, that is the major danger. But in fact, nothing could be further from the truth, because as we'll see here, that's Tyrone in the first half. Obviously, it changed that in the second half, Tyrone weren't getting that hands-on ball every single time. But some figures here for you, which are really, really intriguing. Because I would have said, when I was with Galway in 18-19, I always said, Monaghan, do not let them get hands on ball, because they processed the game so well. They were actually scoring nearly 5 points per 10 on short kickouts and conceding 1 on the turnover. Their profits were close to 40% of the point per short kickout, even taking out the turnover. And I'm looking here, look at the first half. Tyrone won 9 out of 9 kickouts. They scored 4 points off the first possession. I didn't concede anything on any turnovers. Didn't even concede a shot on a turnover. So their profit there was 4 out of 9. Monaghan, and one of the keys in the first half was that Monaghan had 17 kickouts, a lot for one half. They won 12, lost 5, scored 6, conceded 1-1. So even though they've conceded that 1-1 off the loss, you see the value in the hands on ball. Tyrone had that 100% record, and they're scoring just shy of 50%. We go into the second half, and it definitely changed, because Monaghan got 2 points early on off Tyrone kickouts, but ultimately Tyrone won 9, lost 3 in the second half, scored 4, conceded 2. Whereas Monaghan won 9, lost 2, scored 1, 3, conceded a point. But ultimately, when you look at the whole game, Tyrone's short kickouts, this includes the first turnover, Tyrone's short kickouts that they won was 12. They scored 7, conceded 0. And that's even counting the turnover. That's 0.58 points per kick. Monaghan on the shorts that they won, big proviso, scored 1-5, conceded 4. That's 0.33 of a point per hands on ball short kick. When they went long, and this counts the first possession each when there was a turnover, Tyrone scored 2, conceded 3, loss of 0.11 per kick. Monaghan won 9, lost 6, scored 6, conceded 4, profit of 0.13. So whatever way you cut it, the two teams had massive value on the hands on ball kick out. And that has been Monaghan since I started doing analysis on them in 2018. Tyrone, not as much, to some extent, not as much as Monaghan, but ultimately the hands on ball was key within that whole kick out war.
Okay, and let's talk about, right, hands on ball is one thing, but as you and I are well aware, what ultimately wins a game, right, is our expected score, okay? And once your expected score is high enough, will tally on a consistent basis with what you actually bag at the end of a game, right? You're going to bring us through. Tyrone's expected score, right, was actually higher than Monaghan's. So, in effect, their overall effectiveness, where they shot from, the chances they had, they should have won this game.
Yes, and again, it's the second week in a row. And again, though I am going to be quite scathing on one element of Tyrone's play, ultimately the thin line there is your expected score. And again, I'll give a quick overview every week. Expected score is the difficulty of the shot. What was it, a 60% or a 70% or a 20%? The thin line there is the expected score. And just before Monaghan got the goal to put them in the lead, you can see, all things being equal, Tyrone should have actually been up by 4 points, 4 to 5 points. So that's a key factor in all of this. And I suppose it's important to point that out before we go into more forensic elements, that bad at certain elements where they probably should have won the game. And I suppose that's probably a key point to make before we move on. Expected score, Tyrone were slightly better.
Yep. We're looking here, right? one of your KPI or key performance indicators, which you regularly espouse, is obviously the scores per 10 phases, right? And ultimately, both teams were tracking at above a 4 point per 10 phase average.
Massively so. And this is a key point that we'll go back. We look 5 games into the National League. I put these up on Twitter. I haven't updated it, but I'm taking it that 4 points per 10 phase. That's counting goals, everything thrown in together, is your average. And you'll see here, Tyrone at 4.1 points per 10 phases in the league, up to 5 games. Monaghan at 3.9. Okay, so that's that. They're about more or less average. And I made that point in those tweets that offense wasn't Tyrone's problem. They were slightly above average, ever so slightly. Defense was their problems. You see there, Monaghan 4.2 points conceded per 10 phases. Tyrone were the outlier there on 4.7. So there was a defensive problem which we looked at in the league. Now, if we look at this in the overall game, the expected score per 10 phases for Tyrone is 6 points per 10. And for Monaghan, it's 5 points per 10. Now, obviously, the inverse of this is that's what each have conceded. So Tyrone's 4.7 average, which was an outlier in a negative sense in the first 5 games of the league, has gone to 6. And Monaghan's 4.2, which was just below average, has gone to 5. Now, the point I'm making is, if this was a brilliant offensive display by both teams, you'd assume that they should have had higher offensive displays in the league, unless they've been working on stuff in the last 2-3 weeks. Ultimately, what I'm seeing here is the fact that both teams actually, I think, have defensive problems, which we're going to look at shortly. Because, as I say, you can be a glass half full or a glass half empty, or maybe somewhere in between, the analytics guy. But my evidence, we look at it as the point goes on. But for me, the issue here from both sides, and Monaghan had a score concession of 7.8 points per 10 phases in the first half. That's phenomenally high.
So just for our newer viewers, right, when you constitute a phase on the software, right, when that uploads, a phase is essentially possession of the ball, right, for the attacking team. Is there any metric? Do they have to carry the ball into the opposition 45? Is there a certain number of passes before that constitutes a phase?
No, and again, look, most teams do measure attacks, which is a point where you cross a certain line. I can measure. I don't really, because for me, a phase is safe hands on ball. Like if you get with a ball in the corner,
hands on ball,
and you were well, hands on ball safely. If you win it, touching the corner flag and there's 3 lads around you, and you don't get it out of there, I actually don't call it a phase. But safe hands on ball is a phase. Now you can. I could click an extra button here and give you your attacks, but I'm not as gone on that stat as most teams are, to be honest. But look, it's another factor. But look, we look at this, and we look at Monaghan, who were slightly below average defensive figures in the league, but frighteningly so yesterday. And we'll just look at this forensically at a problem. And I suppose there's one key team to this whole show. Get any coaches in there watching. There's a key team that Monaghan weren't great on and Tyrone were really poor on. We'll see here. And we've done a piece on this on Tyrone already, how Enda Hesham was coming late and causing carnage in the National League. Tyrone looked like they'd learned their lesson to start to defend with more urgency, getting across the line to match numbers on the far side when the ball was played across. I never pointed out, actually, on the league show, Tyrone got their goal off that. Now, we watch here. This, again, is tag a man +1. Every Monaghan man here has a man and there's a sweeper. But this is the key dynamic in modern football. The late runner from Tyrone. He comes in here, not even unseen. But the point here now is you've got a Monaghan man at the front of the arc who's got 2 guys to deal with.
Yeah.
And for me, and again, not to labour the point on poor old James McLean. Poor old James McLean does whatever, 50 grand a week. He's not too poor. He's probably the only top tier soccer player I've ever seen doesn't understand this. So I don't know if soccer players get coached this. I never play under a really qualified soccer coach. I don't know if top tier soccer players are coached this or they just know it, or if it's part of an overall setup. But for me, this Monaghan man has to realise there's 2 of these I have to stay behind the deeper threat. And what that will ultimately do is bring you back to this deeper defensive arc. Now, you can cook this one of two ways. But if we just keep with that defensive rule that, as I say, all top-tier soccer players that I've ever seen, bar maybe one, understand. I'm here, I've got to get behind the man who's going to end up in the more advanced position. But he stays on the 45. Instead of, now, if you take the thinking out of this, if you're faced with higher numbers at the front of the arc, all you can do is drop into a deep zone arc. And you'll see a number of them are in it. But that Monaghan man there needs to read where the deeper runner is going to be and end up in behind him. But he's not. And the Tyrone man just saunters in and kicks the ball over the bar. Now, for me, that's a defensive structural failure. Now, Tyrone have explicitly tried to poke this hole, and teams are doing it now. And Tyrone were the worst team at defending this in the early parts of the league, and probably realistically going back over a couple of years. As I say, it just wasn't really exposed in certain key games when they won the All-Ireland. But ultimately, when you look where that point is kicked, the defence has actually fallen back to that arc organically. Now, you could try and coach lads a 2v1 rule, and I don't want to be boys I've worked with when you got on and Galway and clubs, you know, the 2v1 rule, and you know, there's been plenty of videos given to plenty of players on the 2v1 rule. Ultimately, for me, if you want to take the thinking out of it, if they've got more numbers between the 45 and the 65, all you could do is go back and defend that area there zonally, which is where they end up, but they end up on the back foot instead of on the front foot, and the ball is just kicked straight over the bar.
Now, on that, right, we're looking at that shot being taken on off the left foot, right, in around 25 yards out, right?
More than 25.
No, from the sideline, right?
Sorry, yeah.
And it's that's in around that's about a 35, 37 meter shot in total.
Yes.
Percentage wise, that's no gimme, right?
It's not a gimme, but it's still, I'm trying to do my Pythagoras theorem here in my head. I'd say it's closer to 40, but it's 40 yards uncontested. It's still, I'd have to reference my software, it's still at least a 58%, maybe 60% shot. Could be 65, probably 60% shot. You can't just be giving up 60% shots. And the point I'm making is, if you're on the front foot and you take that same shot, but there's a defender charging at that man, and he's got a blue jersey in his eye line, and he may have to put the shot over the block and hands, or at least feel he has to get it a bit higher to be sure. All of a sudden, that 60% could drop to a 30%.
Yeah, and there's no even
playing catch up. It's like it might as well be a free.
Yeah, and there's not even moderate pressure on this.
There's zero pressure. And we see again. So when we look at the context of that, and I haven't done my homework on it. I suspect that's the highest phases per 10 points per 10 phases this year. I'm nearly sure it is actually, and possibly this year or last year, taking top 8, top 10 teams. And we see it here again, and we see the issue here. You've 4 Monaghan men lining up 5 Tyrone men. Now, for me, there's 2 possible thought processes here. Because the 2v1 rule, for me, it's the most fundamental defensive rule in Gaelic football. In any field sport, basketball, Gaelic football, you can't go forward to a man when there's a more dangerous man behind you. It just doesn't make any sense. Now, but the problem is, this isn't a black and white 2v1. It's actually a 4v5 or a 3v4. And it's not always as explicitly clear. But again, what do we notice? The late runner is the one who creates all the complication here. So this is nearly everyone in Division 1 is at this now, if not everybody. But Tyrone have got really explicitly serious about this. The late runner comes, but the problem we see here again is Monaghan have a man less in this area. What does this Monaghan man between the 45 and the 65 need to do? He needs to cover the man in the dotted oval there who's in the deeper position. But as we see, he's accelerating out towards the ball, leaving an unmarked man, Michael Burns, inside him. It's just, for me, it's just structurally dumbfounding defending. Now, again, you look at that image. What can you do? All you can do, for me, simple defensive rule. They've abandoned their sweeper. I can see it's a 4v3. Just drop back to the 45 and defend deep zonally, but definitely don't charge out to the man outside the 65 on the ball and leave the man halfway between the 45 and the 65.
And not to mention, look where the left corner back is in that, right?
This image or the previous image?
Even the one you have there, right? Look at the Monaghan, the number 4, right? The left corner back, okay?
Yeah.
So basically, he's there now, about to mark in. Now, he's marking the right half back, okay? Number 5 there, Tyrone. Now, when this is being kicked in, the number 4 for Monaghan is walking. Look at his arms. He's actually walking back to the action, right?
But again, the point I'm making, I'm not going to hold that against him because this parameter is in place. He's on his man.
Yeah.
You know? And look, there were a couple of man-marking jewels there yesterday, like Conor McCarthy and Peter Hart at different times looked to be man-marking each other throughout that game. More McCarthy to Hart. Now, again, there's a question mark there because when you concede an expected score of 6 points per 10 phases and an actual score of 5, I'd be asking myself, if we play Tyrone again, was there value in taking Peter Hart out of the game, more or less? Relative to our whole defensive figures, I would say there wasn't, so I wouldn't do it again. They're probably the worst defensive figures per 10 phase expected concession in Division 1 teams this year. So I was like, and you've actually possibly got to the crux of it there. They're man marking to an extent.
Yeah. Do you know what it felt watching this? Right. Do you know what it felt watching this yesterday? It was almost both teams set up, right? Their blocks, almost like a castle wall. And once the ball went over the castle wall defensive system, all hell broke loose. The strike runners were in behind, right? Tyrone the first half, right? The amount of times they got runners off the shoulder, in behind Monaghan, right? You even looked at caption there in the screen, right? Look at how far advanced they are ahead of the Monaghan lads, right? Which, in this day and age, most of the times you're going to see guys marking men back. Once they got over that castle wall, they ran amok. Second half, we're going to get to, right, complete change.
Yeah, but again, the point I would make, and as much as this was a problem for Monaghan, and I want to make the point again that Tyrone have fabulous footballers, fabulous natural footballers. So if there's chinks in the armour, Tyrone will expose them. The same as Galway will, the same as Kerry will, the same as Dublin will. I'll say the same as Donegal would have, say, last year, a lot of players missing. But for me, those 4 on Tyrone are the top 5 technical teams in the country. Mayo have something different, but it's not the same technical, natural forwards as those 5 I would have mentioned. Donegal, the amount of players that aren't playing this year, have definitely dropped out of that. You know, so if you get these little things wrong, like Tyrone, no better boys to expose it. There's pure class in that football team. And it's that straight line. One line break is made. As you say, the castle wall might as well not be there. But that's just giving an idea. As I say, Michael Burns got in there. This wasn't his greatest moment, actually. This was one of the 12% of phases. Tyrone didn't get a shot off in the first half, but it's an issue. But yeah, that's exactly how it happened. And that leads us on. As I say, the defendant from Monaghan, you know, they were in big trouble. Tyrone got off shots on 82. Was it 88 or 82% of phases? We'll see it. It's coming up. Sorry. Here it is. Like, Tyrone got off shots on 86% of phases in the first half. 6.2 points. Sorry, I might have exaggerated that earlier. I think I might have said 7.8. Sorry. 6.2 points per 10 phases. Bang on expected score. You know, it was... But the point I'm making is Monaghan still had a total score per 10 phases of 4.7. Expected score of 4.1. Second half is here, and it flips. We'll come back to that in a minute. But what we need to look at here, and I'm going to skip forward a few shots here. It's the same issue, but more for Tyrone. Now, that second half, for me, the writing was absolutely on the wall. And I'm gonna, if I could illustrate the first half in one piece, it's this here. Gotta give you the key numbers. The key numbers from this first half. Now, we did Monaghan and Kerry in the first game of the league, or the second game of the league.
Yeah.
Or was the third game? And I did it. The key was, for me, that Monaghan tried a load of quick transitions that didn't work out. And when it went through the hands, they were quite successful. I then went and looked at stats from 18 and 19, where they'd rarely quick transitioned off short kickouts. Now, bear with me here. If you want the detail in the first half on how Tyrone didn't do anything different. Either half, notwithstanding the wind and kickouts a bit. Monaghan did, but the patterns didn't change. The amount of A, B, and C they did in the patterns changed. The results didn't change. Now, this is key. 16 first half phases of possession for Monaghan, right? I have 7 marked down as process, pure process, no adventure. I could probably go in there myself, be involved in some of them, just play the right play.
Pawn off the ball and
wait for one of the big hitters to break the line. 7 of those, 9 quick transitions. Now, there's a few subsections off this. When they processed the play and kept through the hands, they had 6. They got shots off on 5, 2 wide, 3 points, 1 turnover, 50%. When they kicked it in the process, which is to say, it was all slow. It was actually begging sauce, man on man up front. I'll kick it in. Brilliant. Scored a point. When they quick transitioned through the hands, and I didn't subdivide this in the Kerry game. When they quick transitioned through the hands, they scored 3 out of 3. When they, and this is the key outlier on Monaghan stats, and Monaghan could potentially win in All-Ireland if they grasp these stats. And that might sound like quite...
Hang on, back up the truck now. Say this again, O'Mara.
I'm not sure the full back line has the experience or the whole package, but when they quick transitioned with kicks in the first half, they did it 6 times. And they got turned over on 5. And they got 1 point, 17%. Now, when you mix all these up, and you basically say, when they kept it through the hands, they scored 67%. When they kicked it, they scored 28%. But the bigger outlier, and a second half figures here, somewhere, I've misplaced them. No, I haven't. They're on the same page. Ultimately, when Monaghan tried to quick transition with kick passes, and for some reason that figure has gone off. This is the image of the first half, right? Monaghan are coming out. They have a 2v1 here with Beggan, the master of possession play out with the back. You want to be up very early to plan to high press Monaghan and have any joy in it, because Beggan's the master at this. 2v1, gives it out here to cornerback. What do they try and do? Now, even for Dublin or Kerry, I'm not sure about this kick pass. Even though it could potentially make a man-on-man, I just think the risk-reward here is ropey. Now, the point I want to make, and I haven't actually, because I did all this manually, I'm hopefully in a week of this all being automated on the software, but I did all this manually. It took time. Turned over. Good man, but what I haven't counted what happened on the turnover on these, which I suspect will be a lot of scores conceded. But what I'll make a point about Kerry, Dublin, Mayo, Galway. Tyrone have athletic weak links in that middle third who do jobs, be it fielding or game controlling. But you imagine that and this turnover went straight up with a Tyrone score. Imagine that turnover there on Brian Fenton, Matty Rowan, Killian McDade, or Dermot O'Connor, the Kerry Dermot O'Connor.
Blue Murder.
This is not. Sorry?
Blue Murder. All hell break loose. Yeah, you're conceding balls like that, you're dead beat.
And this is against a lesser athletic middle 8 by a long way than those 4 teams. So that's the image of the first half. Second half. The pattern.
Hang on now. You just told me Monaghan could win the All-Ireland. This better be good.
Second half. Now, this is up against the statistically worst defence in the National League. There's going to be other questions asked by other defences, but just within the and listen, they only lost an All-Ireland semi-final by a point 2 or 3 years ago to the eventual winners from that, or an Ulster final. Sorry. Second half process through the hands, 6 points, 1 wide. Kicked, 1-1 scored, 2 turnovers. But that's still process with kicks. And we're going to look forensically at a few of those in a minute. Quick transitions through the hands, 4 out of 4. Kicked, 3 turnovers. That image we looked at a minute ago, that is the image of what Monaghan need to stop doing to win football matches.
So you're sitting down with Vinnie Curry, right, for a debrief, right, this evening. You say, Vinnie, yesterday's match, right? Here's all the warts. Bang, 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 bang. Now we're going to go into the key personnel, right? In a couple of minutes that Monaghan actually have. They actually have the raw materials. They have the assets to execute this. You say, listen, Vinny, balls in hand, you could win the All Ireland this year.
Yeah, I don't think it's an outlandish suggestion. And Monaghan have beaten most of the big guns at some stage. Kerry snatched the draw.
Yeah.
It with a brilliant goal in injury time in the Super 8s in 2018. You know, they were Galway's Achilles in 18. You know, they've been there. You know, Donegal, even when they were a top 4 or top 5 side, were consistently losing to them. I want to show it forensically. Now, before we, again, this is an inverse because let's look at Tyrone's defence, firstly. And how, so we've looked at the stats. Now let's look at this forensically. Now, there's not much forensic in this. There's a little bit. Actually, Kevin Mulcahy, an SSE coach on Twitter, I've got looking at his stuff, and he did put up a hypothesis, which I thought was very interesting. Maybe Tyrone are planning the rest of the sea for the first group game, and that this is all collateral damage. Says maybe I'll put 2 and 2 together and get 22. I hope for Tyrone's sake he's right, because this, by any stretch, you know, is just horrendous. Criminal mistake. Well, look, it was shot into the keeper's hands. You know, that's the rule number 1 in Gaelic football. Don't do it. But Burns was well within his right to shoot. He just didn't catch it right. Beggan catches it, but Tyrone have 15 men behind the ball here. At this point, there should be no threat. But there's a Monaghan man jogging out there between the D and the 45. Nobody from Tyrone thinks to chase him. Now, there's one man explicitly and specifically short. This kick pass is now played down the way. Sorry, this reminds me of a key note I had here. But I thought about through the hands, just to go off track for a second. I call through the hands hand passes or kick passes that a junior B could kick.
He's going to execute,
yeah. This is on the borderline. But a junior B would probably make this pass 4 times out of 5. So on my stats, this isn't considered a kick pass. The way that I need a different word just to make that point, because people looking at this that with a forensic eye saying, "Hang on a minute, that's not accurate."
Yeah, well, let's call it low percentage ball retention. Okay, this is still low percentage ball retention.
So this is
you're kicking a ball.
And
you're taking 6 Tyrone lads over.
With a simple kick pass. You know, now they're man on man. They haven't even gone full speed yet. Look at all the Tyrone bodies trying now. They're not all at fault. To be fair to Michael McKernan, he's nearly done a Makelele. It's not quite a full sprint. He's taken over 2 Tyrone men at this stage to get back to try and tackle. Frank Burns comes in here and does something I think he should know better. He goes in, the old Monaghan one against Dublin in 05. Never tried to. This is banned. When I coach him, this is banned. I'll stop a training session if somebody does this. Try to speculate on intercepting a hand pass, knowing that if you don't, and 90% at club and 98% at county, you're not making this interception. And now you're out with the game. There's Burns in the white oval. Like, I would stop a training session if someone did that. In a club senior or even junior team. That's the truth. Man's in the back door, straight over the bar, same shot as last time, no pressure. Probably he's on the right foot, probably a 60% shot. Went over the bar, right? So that's just looking at how, I don't like the word leggy. I think it's generally cheap and it covers over a lack of forensic analysis, but it was either lazy or leggy. There's no 2 ways about that. That score from top to bottom was horrendous.
We put it down to fatigue. I mean, a guy going across, jumping up in the air, a hand pass, you know, like, I mean, it's laissez-faire. It's Ricky Dink. You know, you're getting nothing.
Well, Frank Burns is one of the best game controlling footballers in the country. I don't know that as his form. I've never spotted that as his form. So maybe there's something what Kevin Mulcahy is saying that, you know, that these boys, and I'm still astounded that none of the Ulster teams have said, nah, putting out the McKenna Cup team in the Ulster Championship, give ourselves 6 weeks to get, because there is an enigma here that are you peaking for Ulster now, knowing that it actually reduces your capacity in 5 weeks' time for the group stage of the All-Ireland? I think this time next year, the whole mindset will have changed. I'm amazed that neither Tyrone nor Derry took that mindset yet, but look, who knows what they're planning.
But on that,
I mean,
as good and all, right? I mean, we can talk about permutations, right, all day long. Ultimately, this was a game of football, right? Packed house up in Armagh, right? Structures in place to wanted to win. But let's talk about Monaghan, right? In terms of Monaghan as All Ireland, right, or potential All Ireland bloody winners here, right? They have raw materials. Like look at McCarthy, O'Hanlon, Brannigan, O'Connell. You talked about Frank Burns being leggy. These four guys will put the fear of God in you.
Well, they would, and that was my final point. You're 2 steps ahead of me there. They are, and I'm going to show you. Going to come full circle on those 4 boys, right? But again, the point I want to make now, I want to make the point here. This is more good Monaghan than bad. To go back on Monaghan, they need to get their score concession per 10 phases down significantly. That's black and white. But offensively, they can be the best offense in the country if they believe in the stats I'm giving here. Now, this is brilliant. Modern football, Carl O'Connell, one of those 4, probably the most valuable skill, or one of the most valuable, possibly the most valuable skill in modern Gaelic football, is to be able to bring the ball down the line. That's the end line. He's near the corner. To be able to bring it down there now, in fairness, it was one of the inside forwards who made the more difficult play. They had to bring the ball down there, suck in a load of red jerseys before you bring the ball back out. That's a major skill and the risk-reward balance that the top players can bring it down there. No one. It was Jack McCarron. Sorry, Jack McCarron was on the ground surrounded by 2 players.
McCarron
It out to O'Connell. They got it back. If you can get the ball down to the corner, suck in a load of players and bring it back out, it's the most valuable zonal defence breaking mechanism in modern football. But watch the key here. I think Beggan gave the assist or secondary assist for 2-3 yesterday. Monaghan didn't throw caution to the wind. Tyrone didn't deliberately abandon a sweeper. They've had extra bodies sucked in there. Beggan has timed it brilliantly. And all of a sudden, what has to happen? The Tyrone man, he's hitting behind that arrow. The Tyrone man has to come out, or feels he has to come out. Now, I'd still go back to the 2v1 rule and say he should have stayed with the man inside and maybe force a slightly pressured point shot from 35 yards and a handy shot here. Now, look, he still sidestepped him. But, now, we go back to the first half. When Monaghan did this in the first half, they had those figures. They had 5 shots from 6 phases. Here we are. And it's the same team on both. Only I think Tyrone collectively and individually are well off the decision-making here, in my opinion. Here, now I spoke about Darren McCurry getting the messy role and leave him up there. But obviously when you're playing Monaghan and Beggan comes forward, look, maybe you could leave him up there and make Monaghan ask the question, are we willing to let in a goal here, an open goal here? But I think Monaghan will still bring the players forward and lose 1 in 10 games like Kerry in the league last year, where they get turned over twice here, 2 open goals. But for me, Darren McCurry again, 2v1. He has to see, there's no point in me going to the ball here because Beggan's just got to come in behind me. But it's not just McCurry. The entire front line of the Tyrone team are getting it's 5v4, but ultimately it's the 2v1 rule. For me, they all have to see, Beggan's slipping in here. We all need to get back to where the least advanced blue jersey is the unmarked one. And we've numerical parity at the front of the arc. They don't. Beggan slips in here. He bypasses that whole bank of 4 Tyrone jerseys. Then he comes in here. Again, did Tyrone just throw caution to the wind? No. They've been out-chessed, out-maneuvered. Now McGeary, who was sweeping on this occasion, has to step out. Now, there's intricacies here. I saw Morris Brothers put stuff online earlier. McManus makes a dummy run out and away. I think that was the second dummy run out and away.
Yeah, brilliant.
Loads done here. You could do an individual piece on how good O'Hanlon is against one of the best all-round players, defenders in the country. Conor Moyler, it's nearly a marquee piece on defending by Moyler, but O'Hanlon just gets half a yard on him. But you see the point here, how they've got to man on man. Watch here again. And the key point here is if you don't have players that understand the 2v1 rule. Now I can only assume maybe the coaches don't grasp this in some of these teams because it's just so blatantly clear to me. But we go here, we see a line of 4 blue jerseys out there where there's no danger. For me, Tyrone arses to the ball. And this is a point up in injury time. We see the common team, or is it? It could be the goal. I think it is. Common team here. All of those red jerseys need to realise collectively, there's no point in us staying with our men when Began, and again, and Monaghan went, I don't know, was he the cornerback? He comes to cornerback. There's 2 of them coming up. And those 3 Monaghan men just go straight by those 3 Tyrone men. It doesn't make any structural defensive sense. Whether you talk of it in terms of 2v1 defending, there's 2 men, I have to stay behind the more advanced one, or a simple rule. If you see the opposition have the whole team, including the keeper forward, just drop.
So let me ask you here, right? Let me ask you a question.
Just go on before I do.
Right.
Here we are. Sweepers have to come out again. Carl O'Connell, 1 line break. It's man on man, 1 line break. And again, 2v1 rule. Step back on the shooter and let them have an 85-90% point shot. Don't let them in for the goal. Now, we could discuss that all day.
Yeah, Rhino too.
Everybody else has discussed that. We'll leave it. But you see the structural problem there. For me, the Tyrone, individually and collectively, some of the understandings there of defending are really poor. And that, score, despite the fact that they had a higher expected score, Monaghan got 2 goal chances, nailed both of them. Tyrone did have 3 handy misses. And they had 3 goal chances, 2 reasonably 50% or higher, scored 1 out of 3. I'll say 1 out of 2 good. So with all that, but the heel of the hunt here is I don't buy the rhetoric that this was a brilliant offensive game with 2 teams who's too cautious to win. I think this is a Monaghan team who need to look at the data. I should be sending them a bill in the post. I've done it for them. It's there. It's black and white. Go through it. I'm not making the numbers up. I have the timeline here. Stop trying to kick the ball through a quick transition. Keep it in the hands for reasons you come on to those 4 boys you mentioned. But for me, this was a game of structurally really poor defending. And that's why it was so high scoring as a foundation. There's other things which we'll discuss briefly.
So Vinny Curry, if you're listening now, there's a bill FedEx its way down there to you in Castleblaney. And Camille will tell you, right, Davy Burke made an assertion after the Roscommon Mayo game, okay? And he said that every single team tries to play the same way. If they don't play the same way, they're trying to play the same way now.
I suppose key point I'm keen to make before we finish up here, I did allude to them. Like, Dublin, Kerry kicking the ball through the middle third. Not that one I showed, but if it's on, absolutely. Because the advantage is the more athletic team. Galway, probably. Mayo, if it's the right ball. The reason, there's 2 things for Monaghan. There's 2 issues. A, by top 6 standards, they do have athletic weak links on average. So 3 or 4 lads on that Monaghan team are not going to catch any Mayo player. Bar maybe Aidan O'Shea. I don't mean that disparagingly. Just he's your magic. He's not your athlete. You have 13 Mayo players. There's 3 or 4 of those Monaghan boys aren't going to catch an open ground. There's 14 Dublin players. There's probably 14 Kerry players at this stage. Certainly 13, and there's 14 Galway players. 13 at least. But the second thing they have going for them, and we'll get into this again, Conor O'Callaghan for me is the most value out now forward in the country. Why? Because unlike some of the bigger, there might be bigger names, but other big names who get magic scores but kick a lot of ball away, O'Callaghan appears to have a low centre of gravity, but I believe he's 6 foot tall. Yeah. O'Callaghan gets the ball and he either goes by you and scores or assists from inside 25 yards, or he recycles. But he almost never loses the ball. And he's still scoring as much and more than the McManuses and the Cliffords and whoever else. If I look around the country, the second standout player who's fractionally behind Conor O'Callaghan is Ethan Doherty from Derry. Scored or assisted 2-2 versus Monaghan in Ulster last year. Same against Donegal. I don't buy into the All-Stars, but he was a standout All-Star. Most teams might be lucky to have 1 or 2. Monaghan have 4 guys that you're just having a nightmare if you end up toe-to-toe with these boys. And assuming back to your original point, right? Hands-on ball, right? Well, again, just get it. Even get to a defensive arc. You've got Shane O'Hanlon, you've got Bannigan, you've got Conor McCarthy, and
Carl O'Connell.
Those lads are all cut from that Conor O'Callaghan ilk. And even in a process play, you go over and back 3-4 times. It's only a matter of time until one of those boys gets the ball on the wrong matchup, and they're unlikely to be stopped. And even if they are, the chances are to recycle it. Now, yesterday, I didn't get time to tally it, but I make it that those 4 players between them, I think, were the key line break for 1/6 of those process play yesterday. And more than anybody, Monaghan have that in abundance. Even forgetting the stats that with the quick transition to trying to kick the ball yesterday, it was a disaster. Process is more valuable for Monaghan than anybody else because they have 4, not quite Conor O'Callaghan's, but 4 lads pretty close to. And if they recognise that and use it to their advantage, I think you could be looking potentially at the most formidable offence in the country. I say that they're not technically better than Kerry, but I think that score per 10 phases could be better than Kerry if they were to play more of that model. If the quick counters on through the hands, do it. If it's not, slow it down, process it, over back. And when the front line break is on for those 4 boys, and obviously you've still got the joker in the pack, McMahon up there. But the defensive figures are still miles off where they're going to need to be.
Okay. Well, listen, the old stretch and evens come on, right? The championship season is well and truly up and running. We've a lot to look forward to the next few weeks. Up to including a full championship preview the next couple of weeks of the group stages. And in addition, the viewers can also look forward to a masterclass in how teams be set up from the Professor O'Mara himself. Stephen, great having you with us again tonight. We'll keep our lid and we'll see you all next week. Slán.